The Hoop Heads Podcast is brought to you by Head Start Basketball.
Hey Hoopheads! Wanted to take a minute to shout out our partners and friends at Dr. Dish Basketball. Their Dr. Dish shooting machines are undoubtedly the most advanced and user-friendly machines on the market, and they truly accelerate skill development faster than ever. Learn more at drdishbasketball.com and follow their incredible content at Dr. Dish B-Ball on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Mention the Hoopheads podcast and save an extra $300 on the Dr. Dish Rebel, All-Star, and CT models. Also, make sure to check out the new Dr. Dish Home Machine, which is perfect for these crazy times when gyms and schools are closed. Visit drdishbasketball.com for details. That's a great deal, Hoopheads. Get your Dr. Dish shooting machine today.
Hi, I'm Dan Krikorian.
And I'm Patrick Carney. And we're Slapping Glass.
And you're listening to the Hoop Heads Podcast.
Hey Hoopheads, we all hate ankle sprains, and they happen way too often. Ankle injuries are the number one sports-related injury. Arise is trying to change that. With the iFast, your athletes get preventative protection and full mobility. Athletes no longer need to wear bulky braces that limit performance and give mediocre protection. Anyone playing sports should be using these products. Keep your athletes in the game. Don't wait for them to get hurt to take action. Visit www.arise.com, spelled A-R-Y-S-E, and use the code HOOPHEADS to get 20% off the future of performance. That's ARYSE.com with promo code HOOPHEADS to get 20% off. Prepare like the pros with the all-new Fast Draw and Fast Scout. Fast Draw has been the number one play diagramming software for coaches for years, and now with its integrated web platform, coaches have the ability to add video to plays and share them directly to their players' Android and iPhones via their mobile app. You'll quickly see why Fast Model Sports has the most compelling and intuitive basketball software out there. In addition to a great product, they also provide basketball coaching content and resources through their blog and play bank. For access to these plays and more information, visit fastmodelsports.com or follow them on Twitter at fastmodel.
If you're not willing to learn, then you don't grow. Most people have always paid attention to the analytics. It's a tool that's in the toolbox. It's not the end-all, be-all.
Frank Ross is in his 7th season with the Washington Wizards and his 3rd as Vice President of College Personnel. He spent his first 2 seasons with the team as Director of Player Personnel. Ross served 6 seasons as Director of East Coast Scouting for the Oklahoma City Thunder. Prior to joining the Thunder organization, Ross served as a scout with the Charlotte Bobcats from 2003 to 2007, evaluating college and minor league player talent. Ross joined the Bobcats after 2 seasons as the lead assistant coach with the University at Albany. Prior to joining the collegiate coaching ranks, Ross was a 5-year veteran of the Arlington County Police Department in Northern Virginia. A 5th-round draft choice of the Philadelphia 76ers in the 1987 NBA Draft, Ross also participated in free agent camp for the Washington Bullets prior to the 1988 NBA season and played professionally in the Continental Basketball Association with the Sioux Falls Skyforce and in Germany with TTL Bamberg. Ross attended American University in Washington, D.C., where he was a 2-time All-Colonial Athletic Association selection and continues to rank in the top 10 in 12 statistical categories, including 4th all-time in career scoring with 1,921 points. Ross was inducted into the American University Hall of Fame in 2007. We recently launched the Hoopheads Mentorship Program. We believe that having a mentor is the best way to maximize your potential and become a transformational coach. By matching you up with one of our experienced mentors, you'll develop a one-on-one relationship that will help your coaching, your team, your program, and your mindset. The Hoopheads Mentorship Program delivers mentoring services to basketball coaches at all levels through our team of experienced head coaches. Find out more at hoopheadspod.com or shoot me an email directly, mike@hoopheadspod.com. Our roster of shows is growing, so don't forget to check out all our other podcasts on the Hoopheads Pod Network, including Thrive with Trevor Huffman, Beyond the Ball, the CoachMaze.com podcast, Players Court, Bleachers and Boards, and our team-focused NBA podcasts, Cavaliers Central, Grizz and Grind, Nuck If You Buck, The 305 Culture, Blazing the Path, #Lakers, and Motor City Hoops. Spanning the Spurs, the LA Hoops Report, and X's and O's NBA Breakdown are coming soon. We're looking for more NBA podcasters interested in hosting their own show, centered on a particular team. Email us info@hoopheadspod.com if you're interested in learning more and bringing your talent to our network. Get ready to take some notes as you listen to this episode with Frank Ross, Vice President of College Personnel for the Washington Wizards. Hello and welcome to the Hoopheads Podcast. It's Mike Klinzing here with my co-host Jason Sunkel. And tonight we are pleased to welcome to the podcast from the Washington Wizards, Vice President of College Personnel, Frank Ross. Frank, welcome to the Hoopheads Pod.
Thanks, Mike. I appreciate you and Jason having me on.
Absolutely. We are thrilled to be able to have you on and talk about the diverse experiences that you've been able to have in the game of basketball and in your life in general. I want to start by going back in time to when you were a kid. Tell us a little bit about some of your first experiences with the game of basketball, maybe how you got introduced to it and what made you fall in love.
Oh, man. For me, Mike, I got introduced organized basketball, I'd say, with Silver Hill Boys Club. I had played Silver Hill football, and I was about to turn 11 years old. My birthday actually is October, so I had just played football, and then I was coming up and turning 11 years old, and I played 11-year-old organized basketball at Silver Hill Boys Club in the Washington, D.C. area, and that was my first introduction to it, and I fell in love with it. My first coach was Mr. Jones, Quincy Jones. I had a great experience with that, and I just kept going after that, and I actually went out for the junior high team. I went to Sugar Junior High School, and I got cut from the junior high team my 8th grade year, and in the 9th grade year, they didn't have middle school sport, junior high sports as we call it, but they call it middle school now. They cut it out in PG County, so I didn't get a chance to play in 9th grade, which I was chomping at the bit. But my very first introduction to organized basketball, and I played around on the courts when we lived in Southeast DC, and then we had moved over into Maryland, and but I never played organized in the DC area. And then when we moved, that was my first introduction. And I actually, my 9th grade year of junior high, I was playing football, and I got left after one of the football games. I went to get a hot dog, and I told the coaches, hey, I was going to get a hot dog, and I turned around after I got my stuff, and everybody was gone.
That's not good.
So I had to walk home, and I walked home, and during that walk, I actually had made a decision at that time that I wasn't going to play football anymore. I was just going to focus on basketball, and I made that decision at 9th grade. And then we didn't have junior high sports in 9th grade, so that really, really messed me up.
So what did you do then? What was the plan if basketball was going to become kind of your sport that you're going to focus on, and now that season goes away? What did you do during that time?
He played in gym class and after school, and then I played, but then I also played boys club. I still had boys club basketball to play, and actually that was the last year, because back then when I was playing, especially boys club basketball, high school coaches had a great feeder system because we were playing organized basketball, and we had pretty good coaching. And so when guys were going to high school back then, there was AAU wasn't that big then. It was pretty non-existent, I'd say. And so, the boys club was the feeder system for high schools. And so, for me, my high school was Potomac High School. And so, I played my last year, for Silver Hill Boys Club, and then went on to play, at to play JV the next year.
So I want to ask you just your opinion, because you're just a little bit older than me, but kind of in the same era before AAU basketball. And one of the things that I always find to be interesting talking to people from different eras who have grown up either with or without AAU basketball, and in your position, when you're looking at players in the game today, how do you see the impact of just the way the youth basketball system has changed? Do you see that? Is there anything that you can point to specifically with today's players, maybe compared to players 20 or 30 years ago that were more a product of the playground and playing pickup basketball as opposed to playing on the AAU circuit? Is there anything different about whether it's the skill level of the players, whether it's their demeanor or temperament? Is there anything that you can point to that's different between kind of the two eras?
Yeah, I think for me, Mike, my passion for the game grew as I went and played on my own. See, everything that we did back then wasn't organized. We'd come up to the court and we picked, you shoot from the top of the key, you pick your teams and you play. And so there was less focus for us at that time. There wasn't a whole lot of drill work going on. We learned how to play actually by playing a lot, but then also, I would go, you play open gym and you play with older guys. So I'd sit and watch them and see what those guys were doing. And then you would go out and mimic it. And then when you were playing with the older guys, they also would tell you, like, if you want to push the ball out in front of you when you go by somebody so they don't back tap you. And so, I remember watching a guy by the name of Earl Woody. Earl had a real slick handle, and I wanted to handle the ball like Earl. And I used to just watch him, handle the ball. And this was just open gym. And I don't even know if Earl ever played organized basketball, but he was a really good, player for open gym. But as a young guy, I learned a lot from watching. And I think kids today watching and then getting out and playing, I think today a lot of emphasis is put on drill work versus playing. To me, I kind of view that more as if you have a bunch of young fighters and they're hitting the mitts and hitting the speed bag and hitting heavy bag, but they don't spar. We did a whole lot more sparring than hitting the mitts and hitting the speed bag and hitting heavy bag.
Do you think that impacts player IQ and feel for the game? Is that where you think you see that come out, where maybe players in the past had a better feel for the game because they were spending more time playing in kind of those unorganized settings where you had the creativity, whereas today's players, one of the things that I always think about is, had I grown up in this era, you would have spent all your time playing against kids your own age with your mom or dad watching with a referee, probably in a gym indoors. And I think it lends itself when there's a scoreboard up there, you tend to go back and only work on your strengths. Whereas I'm sure just like you did, I would go to the park, and if I was playing in a game where the players weren't as good as me, I might say, okay, this game I'm only going to dribble with my left hand, or this game I'm only going to shoot threes, or this game I'm going to do X, Y, or Z, which you can't really do when you're playing in an organized game with a scoreboard. So do you think that comes through in terms of the feel and IQ of players today, maybe compared to what it was in the past?
Yeah, I think you definitely get a better feel for the game the more you play it, and you can kind of figure things out versus someone having to tell you everything, where you should look and where you should go. So, you build on that and you start to recognize different things, how to go to the basket, use your body in certain ways. And then another thing, with kids today, they don't play outside a great deal. So, the one thing you learn when you play outside is you learn that you can't hit the ground a whole lot.
That's true.
And then depending on the court you're playing on, you have to learn how to navigate the pole, the fence, as well. And then, if you're shooting the ball outside, and depending on the wind, you got to learn how to use the backboard at a certain, it's just like hitting the golf ball outside.
Absolutely.
The wind. So you learn all those different things and attacking the basket. So yeah, playing, for that way for me growing up, it definitely helped my IQ because I was able to figure things out and I wasn't told everything to do. So, you do, if you're doing a lot of drill work, but you're not playing a lot, you don't really know how to use the move. you're using it, you're doing it in the drill work, but how do you actually use what you're doing is the thing.
I think that's so true. I think there's, you might be able to, quote, execute the move, but knowing when to actually apply that move in a game setting, I think is a challenge. And we're starting to see, I know I see it more on the youth level and just kind of talking to different coaches. They have the games-based approach where you're having more practices where players are put into small-sided games and you're trying to teach the game through playing the game as opposed to maybe just putting kids in a line and saying, okay, go ahead and do a crossover dribble at this cone and go and finish. So I think there's some good things that are happening on that front, but I just always find it interesting to compare and contrast. And it's one of those things that I wish I could go back and kind of play my life out through both systems and kind of see what the outcome would be, just in terms of how that would have impacted me as a player and how it would have impacted other kids. And I think anybody who grows up, who I'm 50, and I think anybody who's my age or older, AAU wasn't around, and you pretty much grew up trying to figure the game out for yourself and playing on the playground and doing all those things. And I think those of us who are of that age group are certainly biased. I've never heard anybody who grew up the way we did say, oh, I wish I wouldn't have played so much pickup basketball. I wish I could have been in with a skills trainer, doing drills. I've never ever heard anybody say that. So, whether we're just old guys who are biased and whatever, but I've never heard anybody say that they want to go back and do more drills. I think just thinking about playing and being able to do that on the playground, those are some of the best moments that I can ever remember in my life.
And then you also learn that every game counted, because if you at the gym on a Saturday morning and it's packed, and you're you're a younger guy and you out playing with the older guys and you take a ill-advised shot, they're gonna let you know.
Yeah, you're gonna hear about that for sure. No doubt about that. You might not get picked up for 2 or 3 more weeks.
Exactly. You learn, So exactly.
That's good stuff. All right. So when did playing college basketball get on your radar as a young player? Was that something that you kind of always had in the back of your mind from shortly after you started playing at age 11? Or was that something that as you got into high school and started having some success, that started to become a thought and a reality for you? Just when did college basketball get on your radar?
I'd say it started to really illuminate on my radar my 12th grade year. It was always a dream, but I made it a goal going into the summer, going into my senior year of high school. But see, I played JV my 10th grade year, and then I got cut my 11th grade year, and ended up having to play JV again. And I was told that I was only a JV point guard. And so, as 11th grader having to repeat JV again, I decided I went on and did it. It hurt me. I cried about it, and I said, that's okay. I'm gonna show them. And so I ended up playing JV. I got moved up like toward the end of the year of my 11th grade year to varsity, but I played spare. I didn't play a lot. And then going into the summer, the spring of my senior year of high school, because summer league started then in the spring, and then you would, the summer would start and you would already be playing summer league. So I wasn't starting the beginning of summer league. And the guy who was the starting point guard was actually also the quarterback in high school on the football team. He was the backup point guard. And so, but he had already got his scholarship. He was going to play college football, but he was exceptional athlete, had like 4.3 40 speed. And so he ended up going to the prom because that was the springtime going into the summer. His girlfriend was a senior. So he went to the prom, and, I was sitting on the edge of my seat, waiting for my opportunity, and that was my opportunity. And so, I got a chance to start, and that was it. And then so going into then when we go, so I wanted to go to 5-star, and then I was told by my high school coach that I wasn't good enough to go to 5-star, and he wouldn't give me a camp form to go. So I, at that point, I was deflated because I thought that was my chance to go to 5-star. So I ended up going to Capital Classic basketball camp, which was run by the legendary coach in Northern Virginia, Red Jenkins. And I went to his camp, and I said, "This is my opportunity." And so I ended up going to his camp, and that's when. But my goals were going into my senior year was to get a Division I scholarship and to play in the McDonald's Capital Classic. Now, this is from a guy who had played JV, and I remember I was at the game the year before, and that year that was Johnny Dawkins, Len Bias, Jeff Baxter, guys were playing in that game. And I told the guys that I was with, they were all seniors on the varsity. And I remember sitting beside one guy, and I said, "I'm going to be out there next year." And he looked at me and started laughing. He was like, "Man, you just played JV." So those were my 3 goals going into get Division I scholarship. And at the time, really, I didn't even understand the difference between Division I, Division II.
Right, I got you.
I just wanted to get a scholarship. And so I would go to Red Jenkins Capital Classic basketball camp, and I end up playing there. And I ended up getting American University saw me there. My college coach, Ed Tapscott, but his assistant coach, Chris Nockey, was at the camp, and he called him and said, "Hey, I don't know who this kid is, but you need to get over and take a look at him." Ed Tapscott offered me a scholarship, and hadn't seen me play a varsity game. So he offered me basically a little bit after that camp. And so,
wow, that was pretty. I mean, that was probably pretty rare in those days. I mean, I don't think that probably didn't happen very often where you were just, I mean, now we know how important the summer circuit is and all that kind of thing. And I've talked to a number of coaches that, they've offered kids scholarships or had talked to high school coaches who said, my player got offered and, I never even talked to the college coach that offered them. But in our day, that almost never happened.
Yeah. Oh, no. And so as the season starts, I took a visit, and I had 2 schools. I had George Mason recruit me, and American, and I chose American. And Rick Barnes was actually the assistant coach at Mason at that time, and so Rick was the one recruiting me hard. And so I ended up going to American. And so when the high school season started, I had already committed, and I was going to American, and I ended up I made second team All-Met my senior year, and then I played in the McDonald's Capital Classic.
There you go. That's it.
So I was just crazy enough to believe in myself and that I was going to get a scholarship. But as I said, I was a guy who played JV as a junior.
That's awesome. What do you remember about that time in between your junior and senior year as far as how you tried to improve your game? Like, did you step up what you were doing in terms of the amount of time maybe you were putting in by yourself working on your game in addition to the pickup that you were playing? Or what did you do? What was kind of your game plan to make that happen?
Mike, I was in the gym nonstop. If guys was playing, I was there. If you saw me leaving the house, I was bouncing the ball, going down to the court. Yep. That was it. That's all I was focused on.
So when you get to American, what was the transition like for you, both on the basketball floor and from a just social standpoint, going from high school to college? What do you remember about that transition?
Well, it was a huge transition from the standpoint of I came out of high school. I was 6'1", about 165 pounds. So, that I was pretty slight, but I was long. And just as far as the court piece, I remember the very first time we had practice, and they were telling me to turn my man, turn him. And, I'm figuring, okay, I turned him once. And it's like, goodness, turn him again. They turn him again. And I'm like, well, that was good enough in high school. And I immediately learned like everything, guys are stronger, quicker, faster. And, you got to do, you got to be in better shape, and so that was eye-opening to me. But as far as off the floor, then, you got your workload is with class. And not only you got class, now you might have practice at 6 a.m. So learning how to navigate all of that. And, for me, by the time I became a junior, for me, that was when I understood how to navigate all that. And then my game even went to another level because I had, understood also how I needed to work off the floor to become a better player, how much time I had to put into it, and going over to the gym and, at night and getting shots up and things of that nature. So, those were the things that really stick out in my mind. It's just from the class piece was just like, man, how am I going to, I got this class on Monday, this class on Tuesday, I got one class on Wednesday, and I got these two classes again on Thursday and Friday, and now I got practice, and we got, so that was kind of overwhelming. And then you learn to adapt to it, and you kind of, for me, what I learned, the more disciplined I became on the court, the more disciplined I became in the classroom, it kind of spilled over for me,
And I think one of the things that's interesting too is if you were to talk to a Division I college basketball player today, the amount of oversight and support that a Division I basketball player has today is a lot higher than what it was during the time when you were going to school, or even the time when I was going to school. It's like, off season, I remember we'd get done with our season, they'd hand me like a little 3-page ditto of like, here's your off-season workouts. Good luck. We'll see you back here in August. And, in terms of going to class, they'd check to see if you were going to class, but, they didn't have the same level of, academic support and tutors and, different things and making sure you're keeping on top of your schedule. So that was kind of left to you unless you were really, really struggling. Then I guess they could get some help for you. But compare that to today where guys have a tremendous amount of support within the program. It was a different time in our era.
Yes, exactly. I agree 100%.
All right.
100%.
So what was your highlight? What's the highlight of your college career? What's something that when you look back on your career, what's something that stands out for you that you're like, I'm never, ever going to forget this?
The biggest highlight of my college career was, finishing up and getting my degree, off the floor. On the floor, I would probably say my biggest highlight, because this game sticks out in my head, it was when we played GW my freshman year. Now, at that point, that year, I think we were ended up 6-22. So that was a long season. And, we beat GW at our place. We probably had at the time, I'm not going to say probably, we played at Fort Myer Army Base. And that was like, that we had the worst home facility that, in Division I basketball, I think at that time. And so, we beat GW at our place, and they had, Big Mike Brown. Mike played, about 10 years in the NBA, but Mike was he was a beast in the paint, and we beat them my freshman year. We were not expected to beat them. And I just remember, that was such a big game for us because we struggled to get wins that year. And we beat them at our place, and I had my career high as a freshman. And but what's funny about that is how you can play well. Like I had my career high against GW, and then you thinking you got it figured out. And that's why, especially as a freshman. But then,
right.
What you realize is now that next team you play, they going through the sky. He just had 26 on these guys.
Yeah, right.
We can't, this kid can do this and he can do that. We can't let, so, that the highs and lows of your freshman year. But for me, the high of my college career was, I would have to say, that game there, because like I said, we were 6-22, and GW was one of those 6 wins that we had, and we did it in grand fashion too. And I always joke with Big Mike because Mike called me a couple of weeks ago, and I was joking with him about that then.
Those are ones that when you can have bragging rights over somebody that you still see and talk to all the time, there's nothing better than that. It's always better to have one. It's always better to have that win in your back pocket when you have those conversations. Always fun. So you get an opportunity then to get drafted into the NBA. So talk a little bit about what the experience was like, maybe pre-draft. Obviously, again, a lot different than what guys go through today. But just talk maybe about your experience kind of going through, and you went to a couple training camps with both the Bullets and the Sixers who drafted you, and then you got an opportunity to play some professional basketball. So just maybe talk in general about what your professional basketball experience was like. Well,
for me, that experience with when I got drafted by Philly was it was an indoctrination to what professional basketball was all about. But now in '87 there was a lockout. There was a lockout in '87, so we didn't have. There was no summer league, and back then they was doing the Princeton Summer League. So we didn't have any of that. And then we had they got everything straight with the CBA, and then we had a brief mini camp. And at that mini camp, actually that's where Scott Brooks and I first met. And at that mini camp, there were like 22 guys, and the draft choices were in there, and then there were, some other guys that were not drafted, were free agents. And so I remember sitting there, and I remember Matt Gukas had said, we're going to take like the top 8 guys out of this group. And I remember looking around before we even picked the ball up, and I said, well, if I'm not in this top 8, I'm not a pro. So, I ended up, we go to Veterans Camp, and I played the whole exhibition season. I got cut a little before, a few games before the regular season started. And then that's when you really realize, about the business aspect of it. And so, and then I played in like the 6'4" and under league for a little bit, but there was a gap in terms of where there was the CBA team that had my rights at that time wouldn't relinquish my rights, but they wouldn't bring me in. And so I kind of was in limbo. And then I ended up played a few games in Savannah, Georgia with the Savannah Spirits. And then I ended up I got cut and they sent me home. And then I ended up going, I think the 6'4" and under. And then I went and camped with, I go out to the '88 Olympics. That's what it was. I went to the Olympic trials, and Coach Thompson had invited me to come out to the Olympic trials in '88. And so I ended up going out to Olympic trials, and then that's where Bob Ferry invited me to come to camp with the summer camp with the then Bullets. And so I went and camped there, and then ended up playing exhibition season, and I got cut. And then I ended up going to Germany, and then came back, played in the CBA in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, which was in 90-91. And I said at that point, Mike, if I get called up, I do. If I don't, I don't. I'm done. And I was 26 years old. The season was over. We played our last game. I had my hands in the air. I was cheering, and I was cheering because we won the game, but I was just cheering because I was done. Because I felt I had given everything I had to the game, and there were things I couldn't control. And so I just decided I was done. I wasn't going to hoop anymore.
That's a moment, I think, for everybody that, especially when you're so passionate about the game for so long, and then you come to that realization that, again, it's over, that it's time to move on. I think that's a very, very tough thing to do. I know there's still moments for me as a 50-year-old that I tell people, and I've coached for a long time, and I still, when I go and lay down at night, when I dream about being a player. I don't dream about being a coach. I still have dreams about being a player. And so I don't know that the game has ever really been replaced for me in terms of just the competitiveness and all the things that I loved about it when I was a kid. And it's just, again, every athlete obviously faces that at some point. And so when you come face to face with that and you say, okay, I'm done, then tell us what the plan was from there. So I'm done. Now what? What's next? What was next for you at that moment in your mind?
Well, when I said I was done, I was still living in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, and didn't really know what I wanted to do. And, the default at that point is always basketball. And so I was like, I remember I'm talking to somebody and asked them, so what do you want to do? You want to coach? And I said, I don't know. And then I just decided that coaching is not what I wanted to do because I wanted to define myself outside of basketball. So I actually started working at the sheriff's department because I was looking through a magazine and I saw an advertisement for the DEA. And then I'm thinking law enforcement. Never, that was something I never thought I saw myself in. I was like,
what was your degree, Frank?
Public communications.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. And so that was something I was like, man, wait a minute. Okay, you got teamwork. You got to keep yourself in shape. It's uniform. Okay, all right. You know what? Yeah, law enforcement. So I started working at the sheriff's department, and I was originally slated to go through the academy in Sioux Falls, South Dakota with the sheriff's department there. And a guy I became close with named Phil I was going to fill his spot. He was leaving to go to work for the FBI. And he and I became real close. And he was actually the first person to show me how to fire a weapon. And so I used to do ride-alongs with him. But during that period, I also worked inside the jail in the commissary. I ran the commissary during the day, in the evenings, and then I would do some parking tickets also, and just kind of waiting because he was waiting to leave, but it was taking a while, and I just said, you know what? I said I'm just gonna go back home because there's too many jurisdictions at home, and apply at home, and so I ended up driving back home, and I applied in PG County, Fairfax County, and Arlington County. At that time, everybody actually had a freeze on hiring except Arlington County. And so I ended up, going through the hiring process and got hired and went through the academy. And I needed to get away from basketball because I needed to kind of purge myself because I felt, Mike, if I were to play, I wouldn't even play on the weekends. I became an avid runner. I was running 6 miles 3 times a week. I wouldn't even touch a ball. I put all my competitive juices into running. And because I knew if I were to go play, it would pull me back to the game. So I wouldn't even go open gym. And so I ended up getting on the police department. They tried to get me to play with the team that they had in Arlington. And it took them probably like 2 or maybe almost 3 years before I would actually play on the team because I'm a cop now, man. I'm done with hooping, so, and I stayed away from it. And then I ended up playing and, but I was one of those guys that I felt I didn't cheat the game. I gave the game everything I had. So when I said I was done, I wasn't looking back and saying, damn, if I would have just worked harder, I just understood the business of it, the politics of it. And I just said, hey, it just wasn't for me. Let me just move on.
So what did you enjoy about being on the police force? What was it? Was it the team aspect? Or was it kind of some of the things that you described about, you're wearing the uniform, you got to keep your body in shape. What was it about police work that you really enjoyed?
Looking back, the things I enjoyed the most were definitely some of the relationships that I built while I was there. Because I'm still friends with some of the guys I work with to this day, and that was probably the biggest thing. And then you do when you help people or you do something. Like I give you an example. One night I was working and I was working midnights, and I'm riding around, and I look over and see this car in the back of this parking lot, and I'm like, it's backed in, and it's in the Bank of America parking lot. Now, so I go in from the other side, and as I'm coming in from the other side, my supervisor is coming up the street, and it's about 1 a.m, and I, wave. He's looking at me, and I point. He follows me in. We flood the area with our takedown lights, and as I do that, there's a guy in the driver's seat, and then I see a guy running out of the bushes, jump in the passenger seat. Stuff you see it. And I'm like, man, did he just jump in the passenger seat? Because he was coming out of the bushes. So, make a long story short, there was a Wendy's right adjacent from the Bank of America. Well, they had already gone over. It was a gun with a backpack in the woods, and and duct tape and mask, and they had actually already punched. They had a dent puller in the back of the car, and they had actually punched a hole in the manager Wendy's. His car was in the parking lot. They had punched a hole in his tire. They was just waiting for him to come out, and they ended up confessing to what they were about to do, and also confessing to like 10 different armed robberies throughout the metropolitan area, and I ended up getting a meritorious award for that. And that was something that, for me as a police officer, it was gratifying because, you were able to stop something like that from happening. But then it also, it to this day, I can look at something and I can look at it and I don't look at it as, oh, it's just somebody sitting in the car. I'm always like, the things that I learned on the police department, I carry to this day with me. There's certain things that I'll see, and it keeps me aware of everything that's going on.
Yeah, I can imagine that being aware of your surroundings is a skill that, as a police officer, that you continue to get sharper all the time, because you just have to be aware of what's going on. And as you said, now that's something that you carry forward from that point and that time in your life. So when does basketball start calling you back? When do you start getting the itch? When did that hit you that hey, I want to get back into it? Or was that not how it went down?
No, I actually stayed on the police department for about 5 years. And then I left after like 2 years, and 2 years in uniform midnights, and then I think I did about almost 3 years in our community-based unit, which we did a lot of different things. I used to get on the court and play basketball with some of the local guys in the neighborhood, and then I would be sometime we'd have to, maybe lock some of them up for out there, selling drugs. So I did that, and then I started selling. I bought a rainbow vacuum, and the guy that I bought the vacuum from, I came into the business to do it part-time, and I started doing that part-time, and I liked it. And so I ended up getting on the program to become a distributor to do that. And so I left the police department to sell the rainbow vacuum full-time as a distributor. And I remember people said I was crazy or I was taking a risk. And I laughed at him, and I said, you do realize when I put this badge and gun on, I take a risk every day with my life. And they kind of looked at me because they didn't look at it that way. And so I left the police department to be an entrepreneur, to sell the rainbow vacuum. And I did that for 5 years. So we got 5 years on the police department, 5 on the selling rainbows, which is 10 years away from basketball. And then my passion for the game came back. And then that's when I knew I was ready to go back to basketball.
Do you know where to hit the backboard for the highest percentage shots? Do you know when using the backboard is better than taking a direct shot? Be certain that you are taking the highest percentage shots by training with the Shoticle. The Shoticle mounts on your backboard to give you the location of the highest percentage shots. Train with the Shoticle, and you will score more. Basketball is a data-driven game, so don't ignore the data and the facts. We worry about the data so you can focus on shooting. Visit Shoticle.com now and start scoring more.
the first coaching job I ended up getting was at Marymount College with Chuck Drizel. He was the head coach there, and it was Division III school in Arlington, Virginia. And Chuck, I remember Chuck telling me, he said, "Man, I can't pay you anything." And I said, "Chuck,
we've heard that story before."
Oh yeah. And I said, Chuck, I'm not here to chase the money. I want the money to chase me, because if you take a job for the money, there's really no passion to it, And so for basketball, it was, I had passion for it. It was a love I had for it. And so that's why I didn't, I had sat down with my college coach at Tapscott, and he had told me I needed to get some basketball on my resume. So I did that. And so, I had interviewed at American. They had a position open, and I didn't get that, which, it normally doesn't work out that way in basketball. It just seems right where, hey, I played there and they had an opening. I don't have to move. That's kind of like the Ed McMahon job sweepstake in basketball.
Yep.
So I ended up getting a job up in upstate New York at the University of Albany. And it was their second year, might have been Division I. And because I had coached with Chuck for a few months, and then I ended up getting that job in upstate New York. And so, I had to leave and go up to New York. And that's how I got on my basketball trail, by going up there. But actually, what really got me started was the Division III job with Chuck Drizel. And as I said, I didn't blink when he said, "I can't pay you anything."
So what did you learn about coaching that you didn't know in those first two stops? Was there things that as a player you didn't realize that coaches did or spent a lot of time on? Just what was maybe surprising to you about the coaching profession that you hadn't thought about when you were playing?
Because you don't, as a player, you don't understand all the preparation that goes into the game, and then the preparation that's going into practice, and the preparation, all the things that you're doing in practice is building toward the offense, building toward the defense, So, I started to, go back in my mind and think about the guys that coached me, from Larry Harrison to Chris Nockey to Fran Dunphy, to Carl Hicks, and those guys doing in practice. We breaking down stuff in drills, and they got, they on one side doing this and then putting it all together. That didn't register, didn't register as a player, because you come, you play, you listen to the scouting report, boom, 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 and then you go. But when once you get on the other side, you're just like, oh man, all this is what goes into it,
Yeah, absolutely. I think that there's a lot of things that as players you take for granted, and I think the prep is a huge one. And then I think the other thing that we've heard from people is just the amount of stuff that coaches have to do that doesn't have anything to do with the basketball side of it. So you think about the administrative and travel and academics and planning, making sure guys get meals, and that we got the hotel rooms lined up, and, you're dealing with alumni and ADs and all that kind of stuff. I think those are the two most common ones that we hear is preparation, and then just the non-basketball related activities that you spend so much of your day doing.
Yeah, you checking on guys in class and making sure they doing what they're supposed to do, and that's got nothing to do with hooping. But if they don't do that, they don't hoop.
Yep, absolutely, absolutely. All right, so now you're headed to the NBA after the University of Albany with the Bobcats. So how does that come to be? Is that job just something that you go out and you chase, or is that something that you have a connection with the Bobcats, somebody that from your past that's working there? How does the opportunity with the Bobcats come across your desk?
Yeah, it was organic. My college coach, Ed Tapscott, he became the president of the Charlotte Bobcats, but the guy that he hired as director of scouting was the late Kenny Eggman Williamson. And I had connected with Egg at ABCD when I was at Albany. And so when Tap hired him as director of scouting, Eggman hired me as a scout. So I mean, and I knew nothing about. Mike, my whole reason for getting in college basketball, I wanted to be a head coach in Division I basketball. I had no focus, no idea. I didn't even know people made a living in the NBA. I had no. That was the furthest thing from my mind. So Eggman offered me a scouting job, and I took the scouting job, and I've been in the NBA ever since. And I had a couple times that I was going to go back to college. Back when I was with the Bobcats, and if I was going to go back, it was only to go back to be a head coach. If I was going back to be a assistant at a BCS program, I was going back to be a head coach. And so it was tempting to do it, and I ended up staying and didn't do it. But I enjoyed my time as a college coach. I mean, I still have some of the guys that I coach, they call me to this day, and they still call me coach, and
that's awesome.
Offer advice but the whole NBA thing, it was just purely organic. I mean, I had fostered a relationship with Eggman, and he ended up offering me a scouting position, and he and I became very close through that, and I learned a great deal from him because Eggman was the type of guy that if he walked in a room and if it was 100 people, basketball people in there, probably 95 of them knew Eggman.
So what did you learn? What did you learn from him in those first years about the scouting profession in terms of maybe one or two things that when you think back, they were instrumental in sort of what you've been able to do in the rest of your career?
One of the main things, the two main things I could say I learned from Egg is that, he treated people with respect all the time, but then he had his network of people that he dealt with, and that, Eggman was a straight shooter. And so, people appreciated that about him. And so, I'm a straight shooter. And so he had told me, he said, be who you are. And he said, don't change who you are. He said, be who you are because people will appreciate that. And so and I remember the very first time I went and watched, we went and scouted a game, and he and I were sitting beside each other, and he never, we went to a game, he never told me, because I was 37 at the time, 37, 38, I think, when I got into scouting. And I'll say this because, I always kind of laugh when there are young people that want to get into scouting, and they want to start at the highest level. And so, for me, I was 37 years old. I had too much respect for the game. When I got hired as a scout, I'm like, oh my goodness, I got a lot to learn. I didn't think, I wasn't a know-it-all. And so, I always find that funny, you have young people that they see what I'm doing right now and they want to do what I do. But, sometimes I ask them, are you willing to do what I did to get here?
Absolutely.
And so it's not, this is 18 years later. So I didn't just pop up, where I am now.
Right.
And so one thing I never forget, and to this day, even when I'm scouting games, I remember Egg and I was sitting watching this game, and there was a guy sitting to his right, and I was to Egg's left. And so the game's going on, and the guy's over there. He's writing. Going at it. So Eggman looks at me and says, I don't know what he's writing. He said, because he ain't watching the game. So what that told me was the most important thing when you're at the game is to watch the game.
Yep.
So
you don't want to miss 5 minutes of the game writing stuff down, huh?
Yeah. So that was his way of teaching me, not telling me, teaching me, but in a simplistic way, which he had a lot of he had a lot of different ways of teaching you or saying stuff in the simplistic way when you can take a nugget from it.
Was there a point when you were with the Bobcats, or maybe it came later in one of your other stops, where you felt like you had sort of developed your own eye or your own internal system for evaluating players? Was there a point when you got comfortable kind of with your own process and started to trust what your eyes saw and what your evaluation was? Do you remember when you got to that point?
Yeah, I'd probably say it's around the fourth year where you kind of, fourth or fifth year, I kind of settled in to where I'm like, okay, I really, understand, and you kind of, you assess, you kind of can process or assess a lot of different things when you're watching a guy play, from watching in warm-ups to watching during timeouts to watching when he's playing, and then also be able to kind of see how does he fit your team, so to speak. And I can even say that, going back to the police department, it's the same way. It was the same way in that job. When you get your badge and your gun, you trying to figure stuff out when you come out of the academy. There's an element of common sense that's involved in that job, but then there's also the element of if there's something to charge somebody with, do you know what you're looking at? If you see something like, what is this? And in that job, it was around about the fifth year, in that job, to where you feel like, okay, if I don't care what I come up on, I know I can figure it out, and I can go from here. But I'd say round about the fourth year, but I always go back to saying I was scouting when I was in open gym. Because if I had next game and I'm trying to stay on the court, I'm looking at that gym.
Yep.
So it was just more in terms of, it was a different arena, and just kind of learning. You got to learn what your coach likes, what type of guys you want to, that as I said, that you need, just because, a guy, because I like a guy, that doesn't mean that that's the guy for the team, so, you learn, you learn those different things. And I say round about that, third or fourth year, I kind of got, because as I said, I was a little older too when I got into scouting. So, it's not like I was, and then, you also draw from your experience as a player in terms of when you're looking at guys, just like, if you look at it, you watch a guy. I remember watching a guy, he twisted his ankle. He got a couple quick fouls. Okay. Then he came out in the beginning of the game. Then he comes back in the game, slightly twists his ankle, and he asked to come out, and he had him take the tape right off, and he was done. And I'm sitting there saying to myself, "Oh no, he didn't want to play tonight." And so when we had a chance to interview him, I asked him about that, and then he finally, he went on and confessed, yeah, you're right, I didn't want to play that game. Because as a player, I know I've twisted my ankles before, and you tie your shoe up tighter. You try to run it off and see if that works. If that don't work, you go to the bench and let them put a little more tape on it. If that don't work, you come back out. They tape that off and retape it. So if you take your shoe off and have them cut the tape off, and then you put ice on it, you done for the night. It was just a game. So I even drawing from my playing experiences, that when you see certain things, whether even if it's a guy that he might be hunting his shots in the first half and they up by 20, but then the team makes a run and they cut the lead to 2, and then they go ahead, and then he not even trying to get shots in the game, and when the game's tied. So it's just different things that you see that, from my playing experience, that I know, because I know if they done tied it up, I still want the ball.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Yep. Making yourself available, but all of a sudden this same guy, when they was up 20, pounding his chest, coming off hard, and all of a sudden he can't get open.
I know exactly what you mean. So, all right, so let me follow up with that, because obviously as a scout, a lot of what you're just describing there is you being able to take your own experiences and apply them to what you're seeing and compare them to situations that you've been in and players you've dealt with in the past, both as a player and as a coach, and then as you get more experience as a scout. But when does analytics start to become a part of what you do? At what point do you remember the year? Do you remember the season? Do you remember a player? Do you remember a particular GM that you worked for where suddenly analytics became not the end all be all, but when it started to where you started to take it into account when you put together your scouting report?
Well, I when I left the Thunder, the Bobcats, I went to Seattle, and which became the Thunder. So that was Sam's Prestige. I came after Durant, and then we ended up drafting Russell James, Russell, Serge, James.
That was a pretty good run, by the way.
Yeah. Then the last draft I was there was Steven Adams. So, Sam was really forward thinking at that time with a lot of different things and getting you to even though he was young at the time, and he was, getting you to want to try to look deeper at different things. So, he had all, there were always different things that he had us doing at that time when I got there. So the analytics part was introduced around that time, and like you said, it's a tool, and then even it's a tool that's in the toolbox. It's not the end all be all, but from that point to now, analytics, it's gotten more tools in the box, so to speak. So, it's been for me, you have to keep an open mind to it, because, if you're not willing to learn, then you don't grow. So, being introduced to analytics and then, as far as, most people have always paid attention to, the analytics of shooting percentages, free throw percentages, rebounding numbers, assist to turnover. And it's just in terms of putting those things in a different format and having it spit out to spit out different ways to look at that stuff. So, for right now, it's, I embrace it, because it helps you to grow, and it helps you to kind of go back and helps you look at players a different way sometimes, or which do the numbers line up with the eyes, in that regard. So back during that time with the Thunder, Sam was big into that as well.
So without giving away any trade secrets, is there a particular number or set of numbers that you found to be projectable from college? In other words, transferable. Like if you see a player has this metric as a college player, that metric generally translates well to what they might be able to do in the NBA. Have you found patterns of things, that statistics, analytics that go with them, that are attached to them in college, that translate into their pro career?
Without getting too deep with anything, when you start looking at guys' rebounding numbers, those are things that generally will translate from the college to the professional ranks, and so I could say that. Okay,
so rebounding is a big thing. What about? I know a lot of times you'll hear, and we'll hear announcers talking about that if a guy is a good free throw shooter, that generally translates to the fact that he at least has the potential. Maybe if he's not a 3-point shooter in college, that if he's shooting 80% from the line or 75% from the line, that he'll now maybe have the opportunity to extend his range once he gets with an NBA shooting coach and some of the other coaching things that go on. Is that something that you find translatable?
Yeah, I mean, because if you have a guy if you're looking at a guy and he's if as I'd say it this way, if a guy is failing at in all the shooting categories, from you look at his field goal percentage, and then you look at his 3-point percentage, you look at his his free throw percentage, all those he's failing in, that's kind of an alarming indicator. But then if you see a guy, he decent field goal and 3-point may not be that great, but then free throw numbers are decent. That doesn't you don't look at that and be like, oh my goodness, oh man, that's something that gives you some hope, I'd say.
I know, I get it. How important is how much has shooting and the way the game has shifted since you first started as a scout? How much more emphasis has there been placed upon players at all positions being able to shoot the ball when you're scouting? In other words, I'm sure when you started in 2003, you had players who, okay, this guy's a center. We're not really worried about whether or not he can step out on the floor and space the floor for us and shoot threes. Whereas now, clearly, that's a skill I'm sure that you're looking for in basically every position and every player.
Yeah, because if you think back, how the game was 25 years ago, where, guys would open shots, 3-point shots were created because if you had a dominant big man, you had to go double. Then you kick out, swing, and you got an open shot. Well, now, that's done. It's not done that way, guys. Spacing in terms of getting 3-pointers, because most teams want to kind of keep that area open, and there are very few big guys today that are dominant down in the paint like that play with their backs to the basket. So it is important to have guys on the floor that can shoot the ball at all spots, because what happens is, especially in playoff basketball, the ball's gonna find the guy that can't shoot.
Yep, no doubt about that. I think the difference playoff basketball clearly is you compare that to the regular season where teams just don't have the time to prepare and put together a specific game plan. And in a lot of cases, you're not even practicing on, very often during the season. And then you get to the playoffs and you've got time between each game. Right. And everybody. And so that's one of those things that I think as a fan of the NBA and somebody who's not on the inside, you look at that and you try to process and think about why that is and how that happens. And just, the amount of preparation goes back to when we talked about you first getting into coaching and being surprised about the amount of prep that goes into it. And you just think about the amount of time that coaching staffs and, are putting into just designing an entire game plan around trying to exploit the other team's weaknesses and hide their own.
Yeah, because with, as you said, with the once the playoffs roll around, that scouting book gets a little thicker, and so and that's the whole key. And then even if you exploit that weakness this game, then it's a game of chess. Then the other team will try to counter what you made a weakness and try to make it a strength. And so it definitely is.
All right, let's talk about your work with the Wizards, and let's put aside this strange season, and we'll come back to that in a second. In a normal season where you're going out and you're scouting college players to prepare for the draft, how many days out of the year are you on the road during the college basketball season? How much video are you watching of each player? Just kind of give us an idea of maybe what your day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month schedule looks like as you try to prepare those scouting reports.
Yeah, I mean, on an average, I'm on the road like 15 to 18 days out of the month when the college season is going on. And so and that generally, if I need, if I'm, and you try to do it in a, I learned that from the Eggman. He would say, you want to do any crazy traveling, you don't want to leave, you don't want to go from New Orleans to Indiana, back to Atlanta to New York, just crisscross. You want to kind of do it in a kind of chart your trip out to where it makes sense, and it's not hard traveling, and you get a lot accomplished by doing it that way. So and then as far as so when I come off the road, then you want to go, when I come off the road, as far as the video, I'm watching more live games than I am watching video, because during the basketball season, because there's so many games on. So when I'm home, most of the time I'm watching, even when I'm home, I'm watching games that are on versus watching tape games. And video, you'll watch some video on the flights that you download, games you'll download on the plane when you're going to and from a lot of times. But for the most part, during the season, when I'm traveling and I come home, I'm still watching games, because there's going to be games on.
Absolutely.
Whether
Absolutely.
whether if I'm not watching the college game, I'm watching the pro game.
All right. So as you get closer to the draft, and again, I'm talking about a normal year, not this year. As you get closer to the draft and you start bringing in players into your facility to, have their visit, just describe kind of in general, what does that visit look like? How long are the guys in town? And then what are the things that you do with them? And you can get as specific or as non-specific as you want with that.
They'll say if a guy comes in, say he got in early today, say around 5 p.m. Eastern time, for he's working out tomorrow at 10 o'clock. So you'll say if you're taking him out to eat dinner, and have a little FaceTime with him then, and then the next day when he comes into the facility, he'll go through measurements and you want to check his vertical and things of that nature, and they will have had a physical as well. So and then after that, the guy he'll go through like a 45-minute workout, 45-minute to an hour workout, and then after that workout, you'll interview him after the workout, and then you want him also to hit. You kind of have touch points or people of contact around the facility that he's met with, or at least sat down and talked with. So people can kind of get acquainted with the guy and who he is and things of that nature. So and then generally, after that, they'll have a flight out after say probably around maybe about 4 o'clock the next day. And they may be on to another workout, or they're going back to their base camp.
Gotcha. So it's about a 24-hour process, more or less.
Yeah. The guy doesn't fly in morning of. He's going to get in the day before, and then and generally, it's generally going to be 6 guys working out, or it could be 4 to 6 guys. Generally going to be on the floor.
So here's a question that I always find to be, I guess, from my own personal standpoint, I'm curious. When you bring a guy in, and obviously if you're at the point where you're bringing a player into your facility, this is somebody that you've already spent a lot of time on studying them as a player, trying to get to know who they are as a person through whatever methods it is that you go about doing that. When you bring a player in for a workout, I don't know if you could ballpark it or percentage it, but how often does the in-person visit stray from what you thought of the player coming into the workout or into the visit, if that makes sense. So how often are you surprised by something at the workout? It could be positive or negative compared to maybe what you thought coming into the visit.
You mean on the court?
Just in general. So let's say you have a guy like this kid, we really like this kid. We think that he's got the potential to be a great pro. We've heard lots of good things that, he's the kind of guy that would fit into, any team's culture. And now you bring him in and you're like, ooh, maybe not, or vice versa. So how often do they not sort of meet kind of what you thought going in, just in general? Maybe not, not necessarily even just specific to on the court, but just their overall who they are.
Not a great deal. In 18 years, I won't say there's been a huge amount of guys that disappointed you, so to speak. But what I will say, the biggest thing that can make a guy look bad is if he's not in shape. That's one of the big things. Because a lot of times the agents want to know what's the workout, what are you going, what are you guys putting him through, things of that nature. And my thing is, I always say, if a guy's in shape, doesn't matter the workout, because every team has a different workout, so they're not going to be the same. But if you're in shape, that it doesn't matter. You just say, hey man, let's go, let's do it.
It would seem like almost to me at this point, and maybe I'm wrong and maybe I'm being naive, but it just seems like at this point, with the amount of, whether it's just social media or just awareness of what it takes, because maybe a guy 25 years ago could have been ignorant to what the process was like. But at this point, it seems like everybody would be well aware of what's going on. So it seems like it would be almost unfathomable to me and I'm sure it's not, I'm sure you can confirm, but it just seems crazy to me that guys would come in and not be in shape when this is something that theoretically they've worked their entire life for this opportunity.
Yeah, but it happens because a lot of times, what I will say is all you know is what you know. And so a lot of times guys think they might be working hard and they think they're in shape, but then, because you have to look at this too, Mike. Okay. And for these guys, I just think they stopped playing in March. So April, May, June, July, August, September. This is October going into November.
Yeah. 8
months they haven't played. But for the normal, if this was a normal year, you stop playing in, say if you finished in March, okay? So you said April, May, June, and in summer leagues, July. So, okay, April, May. So 2 months and you haven't played and all you've been doing is, remember, speed bag, heavy bag, and mitts. You haven't been going up and down. And then when you come into a workout, now, you got your adrenaline going. It raises everything. Now you compete. You competing against another guy at another level. So if you haven't conditioned yourself to do that up until that point, then what happens is, then it's going to test your recovery on how well you can process that oxygen.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. I get it.
So
I get it
because they stop playing. They're not going up and down. So that in season shape that you had when you were in prime shape, running up and down the floor, and then you stop playing for 2 months, and like I said, speed bag, heavy bag, speed in mitts, bop 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 bop, bop 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 bop, and then all of a sudden you standing in front and you trying to throw that punch and you got something else coming back at you. Now your legs get a little weird, you like, oh goodness,
yeah, better get this together.
Yeah, like you start breathing a little harder.
All right, I want you to look back at the totality of your career and give me, if you can, and it doesn't even necessarily have to be a guy that the team that you were with drafted. Is there a guy that was sort of a sleeper that you evaluated, that you had a really strong feeling that the guy was going to end up being a success, and that's in fact what happened? Is there a guy that was maybe, again, late first round pick, a second round pick, a guy who maybe didn't get drafted but was a free agent that you thought, ooh, I'm surprised that he didn't get picked, that ended up turning out to be a rare, very, very good NBA player? Is there a guy or two that sticks out that kind of fits that profile?
Well, Mr. Westbrook fits that profile because, we took him at 4, and, a lot of people, like 4. So, he was a guy that definitely fits that mold, and, yeah.
What was it about Russ? I mean, clearly, obviously, looking back in hindsight, clearly the athleticism and just the ferocity that he plays with stands out. But what was it about him that made you know that was going to be the right pick for you guys at that time?
He had that chip on his. He had a chip on his shoulder. He was a guy that was overlooked, and if you look deeper in terms of watched him in college, that his passing was better than what people was giving him credit for. And so that was the two of the things, and so but just that chip on his shoulder, and then looking at him deeper in terms of him being able to pass the ball a little better than what people gave him credit for. Well,
it turned out to be the right pick.
Yeah.
Without question.
Yeah. So that was that. Yeah, he definitely, like I said, he was one that I look at and say, okay, Russ, that was good.
All right, I'm going to ask you the reverse question. Without naming names, was there a guy, or has there been a guy that you thought, this guy is a surefire, can't miss, I know this guy's going to be successful, that ended up not making it? And you don't have to name names, but just, do you remember? And then maybe just tell us what it was that maybe you missed on the guy, if there was a player that fits that profile.
Yeah. And, it's, you say surefire. I mean, for the most part, you hoping your guy is going to turn out, and you look at some of the things, you look at some of the analytics that you're using as a tool. You do your background, and there was one particular guy that didn't fit didn't pan out, and a lot of it was because of his work ethic. His work ethic wasn't what people said it was.
Gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
All right. I want to wrap up with one final question, and it's a two-parter. And the first part of it is, when you look forward in your career and you look ahead to where you are right now to where you're going to be going, what is the biggest challenge that you see ahead of you as a professional in your line of work? And then number two, what is the biggest joy that you have when you get out of bed in the morning? What makes you excited to get up and get to your desk and start to do your job?
Well, I'd say it's the immediate in terms of a challenge, getting back into a gym, being able to watch guys live. So
yeah, absolutely.
That's an immediate challenge, because right now we're going to be doing a lot of stuff watching TV, and then rewatching, video of games with guys. So, I mean, for the immediate, that's one of the things. And then I think the thing that gives me, you said like joy.
Joy, yeah. What excites you about every day getting up and getting to do what you do?
Because I never thought I'd be doing this for a living. I never thought, because I've ran into people that say, man, I was born to do, I got to get in. I want to do this. I want to do what you do. Man, I was born. I just, I never, that was not my end all be all. And so for me, the joy I get out of is the people that I work with now. I mean, that, not only because when you can sit around with people and, and you're not just talking work, but you can talk life and people are there for you when you've gone through things in your life or with your family, so, and to have good friends, and the people that I've met in this business. And just like, I had a good friend, BJ Johnson, who passed away, had a tragic accident, a few weeks ago. And they just had his service. They had a service in Houston this on Friday and Saturday. And so I've reconnected with him back in the NBA. I first watched him play down at the Urban Coalition when I was playing in the junior division in high school. So the people that I've met in this business, the people that I don't just call them, they're not just, even the people I work, they're not just co-workers. These people that I work with now, they're friends. So the people that I've worked with in this business, that I've become close with, and even if I've gone to other teams, that's the thing that gives me joy. And then the fact, like I said, I enjoyed it so much. I don't, classify as, as work. So I'm during the normal season, I'm away from my family and we're going to watch games, but I enjoy going to watch basketball. It's I've been, part of this game since I was 11 years old. And, I had an attraction to it then, and I had to get away from it to kind of purge myself to be able to let that same passion, for that passion to come back. And so, like I said, I didn't as an 11-year-old kid, never thought that I'd be working in the NBA and doing what I do now. So for me, it's all a W,
When work isn't work, then you've done something right.
Right. And so, I've done some things but I will say this, Mike, I'm glad I think my appreciation for what I do now wouldn't be the same if I had just gone right into basketball.
I can see that.
I had to get away from it and then do other things, which I enjoy. I enjoy it now. When I did the rainbow vacuum, I enjoyed that, going in and getting somebody to sign that contract for that $1,700 vacuum. That was like going on the road and stealing the win, So,
absolutely.
So, and even on the police department, and I guess that's if that's part of who you are, everything you do, you're going to have passion for it. And so even on the police department, I was that same way. And so, but as I said, I came back to basketball but I needed to get away but doing those other things allowed me to, because I guess that's what's the old cliche. If you love something, you let it go. And then if it
comes back, then it's yours.
And then it's yours. So that's what I did. And that's what I try to, the advice I try to give to some young guys. I just say, let it happen organically. If you just pressing, like, things generally not going to happen that way. You got to kind of let things happen. You plant the seeds, you do the proper things. And if it's going to happen, then boom. If it doesn't, you can't look at this as the end all be all. And I tell people all the time, this is what I do. It's not who I am. And you can't be defined by a position or a title. And, and if you get defined by a position or a title, then what happens when you lose that? I've watched guys when I was in at Albany coaching, and I'd walk into an AAU event, and I got the Albany shirt on, and guys at, at bigger schools, they look at my shirt and hey, what's up? And that's it.
Right.
And then a few years later here, I'm working in the NBA. I got no logo on my shirt. And all of a sudden, some of those same guys wanted to talk to me. And I'm looking, and I'm saying, well, you do realize I was the same guy that had the Albany shirt on.
Right. Yeah.
I just couldn't understand how people were defined by, a logo on their shirt. It was mind boggling. to me, you know?
Yep, it makes total sense. I think, you said it really well when you talked about the most important thing to you being relationships, and then when you were talking about letting something go and having it come back to you. And I've heard the saying used by a couple different coaches that we've had on the podcast. There's magic in the ball, and the ball creates these relationships and these opportunities for people who like us, who have been in the game, and you just never know where it's going to take you. And it's been an exciting journey for you, exciting journey for me, and just getting an opportunity to do all these things. And it's been a lot of fun tonight, Frank, getting a chance to get to know you and talk to you and to hear your story. And before we go, I want to give you a chance to just give people an opportunity to where they can reach out to you. Where can they find out more about you, or at least about the Washington Wizards? And then I'll jump back in and wrap things up.
I'm not a big social media guy. I'm on there, but my main thing is you'll know more about me as the Wizards do better. My goal is to help this franchise to, I work with some good people, and we're trying to get a championship for the DC area. For me, that would be nirvana, because I'm born and raised in the DC area. So that's the goal. And we're working toward that.
Yeah. If you can do it at home, it's always sweeter. Yeah. There's no question about
sweeter.
that.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Exactly.
Absolutely. Well, Frank, I can't thank you enough for spending some time with us tonight. It's been a lot of fun getting an opportunity to hear your story. And obviously it's very unique, and the different stops that you've had along the way, both in and out of the game. And we appreciate you taking the time to join us tonight and share that story. And to everyone out there, thanks for listening, and we will catch you on our next episode. Thanks. If you have an existing podcast or are looking to launch your own pod but aren't sure where to start, the team at My Podcast Manager can help. Our podcast team works behind the scenes so you can do what you do best. We'll help you launch your podcast, make it sound great, and free up your time for the more enjoyable parts of podcasting. If you're ready to put your podcast editing, production, and promotion on autopilot with a trusted team of podcasting professionals, visit mypodcastmanager.com to get started.
Thanks for listening to the Hoop Heads podcast, presented by Head Start Basketball.